demonstrate to BSEE that they have adequate containment resources to respond to a blowout or other loss of well control before any exploration drilling may proceed. Other regulatory reforms, such as the drilling and workplace safety rules, have also been implemented to further reduce the risks associated with OCS operations. Alaska's Arctic OCS alone is estimated to hold approximately 27 billion barrels of oil and 132 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. In 2010, the U.S. consumed 19.1 million barrels of petroleum products per day, importing almost 50%, exporting nearly $1.5 trillion and hundreds of thousands of jobs overseas. Oil and gas production from the OCS is key to any national strategy to diversify energy sources. In fact, as BOEM's own analysis shows, if the proposed program does not move forward, assuming oil and gas prices at $110 per barrel and $7.38 per thousand cubic feet, the foregone production would have to be replaced in part by 67% greater imports. Not developing our own resources, where operators are subject to the strictest environmental standards in the world, is simply short-sighted. Alaska's vast OCS resources are an absolutely essential piece of the U.S. domestic energy profile in any effort to reduce our dependence on foreign sources of oil. AOGA urges BOEM to include lease sales for the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas and Cook Inlet in the final 5-year program. Thank you.
Allison Warden. John Hendricks. I called Allison Warden, not here, so we're going to go to John Hendricks. And after Mr. Hendricks, Kirby Spangler. Mr. Hendricks.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is John Hendricks, Johnhendrix. Slow down, okay. I am not from the Northeast. I grew up in Homer, Alaska. Okay, all right, thank you. 4 generations of my family live in this state. Like a lot of Alaskans, I did a lot of things to get by. I was a commercial fisherman, a salmon permit holder and a limited entry permit holder in Bristol Bay, boat owner. I'm also working in the oil field. I am currently general manager of Apache Alaska Corporation. I'm here tonight to offer testimony in support of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management proposed 2012-17 5-year plan. In particular, support of the proposed Cook Inlet sale 244 identified in 2013. As a background, Apache Corporation is an oil and gas exploration and production company, established in 1954, headquartered in Houston, Texas. Alaska is one of the world's top independent oil and gas exploration and production companies, producing approximately 750,000 barrels of oil per day. In Alaska, Apache acquired initial acreage in Cook Inlet in the summer of 2010. Since that time, Apache has acquired leases from the Alaska Mental Health Trust, and in June 2010, State of Alaska lease sale, bringing our total acreage position to approximately 800,000 acres in Cook Inlet. We are currently in the process of conducting and implementing seismic surveys, employing well over 200 people in Cook Inlet, which will continue for the next 3 years. This will cover from the Susitna Flats to Anchor Point. In August 2010, Apache submitted a letter to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management expressing interest in the federal acreage in the southern Cook Inlet area. I am here tonight to reiterate that support and encourage the department to include this area from southern Cook Inlet down to Shelikof Straits in a proposed 5-year plan. Unlike some Alaskans, I believe in the talent of Alaskans and future Alaskans to make this happen, to work together to contribute jobs and future jobs for all Alaskans of all ages and backgrounds. People in Alaska work a diverse array of livelihoods, from fishing to hunting, trapping, and to the oil industry. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Kirby?
Hello, my name is Kirby Spangler, K-I-R-B-Y-S-P-A-N-G-L-E-R. And I'd like to start by quoting some Greek philosopher. If anybody knows who this is, maybe you can let me know so then I can credit them. But the quote goes something like this. It says, "When the propaganda gets so thick that those who create the propaganda begin themselves to believe it, they are no longer capable of managing a functioning system." This is clearly the case in America today, and is in evidence here tonight. What I'm interested in sharing is how I imagine that we might create a livable future for our children. My son, right over here, 2 years old, out of the wreckage of the status quo that our institutions, both public and private, are desperately trying to perpetuate. I speak tonight to the audience and to anyone else who cares to imagine a different future, not to these institutions. Let me start by saying something about the Occupy movement. The power of such a movement is that it exposes the simple truths buried beneath society's biggest lies. Trickle-down economics is the lie currently being exposed. Massive inequality is the simple truth that is now a part of the national dialogue. Climate change denial is another such lie, perhaps the most devastating of all. Lies like these are essential to the maintenance of privilege, wealth, and power. I imagine the Occupy movement entering a new phase, occupying drilling sites, pipeline corridors, coal strip mines, exposing energy companies as the world's worst polluters, and therefore perpetrators of society's biggest lies. I imagine many Americans, perhaps even a majority, expressing support for such tactics. We are beginning to recognize that the way to make change is not by collaborating with power, but by confronting it directly. I could argue at length that any meaningful attempts at addressing climate change will inherently create a more just, democratic, secure, decentralized, and ecologically sustainable society. All we have to do is break the backs of the world's most powerful institutions. The good news is that our rulers are so out of touch with reality that the system they manage appears to be coming apart at the seams. Thanks.
Matt Carl, now that's the pipeline. Matt? John Hendricks. John. No. How about Tom? No, John. Sorry. John already spoke. John already spoke. But Tom? Oh, yeah. Put his name in twice? Okay. Louisa Yanis. Louisa Yanis. Dave Harburger.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Dave Harbour, former commissioner of the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, retired. And these remarks are my own. I wanted to offer you a perception that, a regulatory perception that I haven't heard tonight. During my tenure, there were 2 times when regulatory commissioners, partners in the regulatory process as you are, have to respond, as this young lady is, to an emergency. And those 2 times featured the locales of Adak Island and Eagle River, Alaska. And in those 2 instances,
the Regulatory Commission responded to a life safety issue and expedited the regulatory process. Arguably, with $15 trillion of debt growing at a rate of about $1 trillion a year or more, we're in an unsustainable civilization as far as our children go. One of the earlier speakers pointed out that our balance of payments deficit could be brought down to about $65 billion if the OCS program were expedited, but over a period of years that will take a lot longer than happening next year, and therefore won't be of much help to the balance of payments. If we look at the world today, it's unarguable that the value of our currency is diminishing, that the rate of increase of imports is growing, and when we argue about climate change and about drilling, and we talk about the effect that has, the carbon effect on the environment, when we don't do it in our own country and use the high-quality fuels that are required by our own regulatory system, we export that to other places in the world where those high qualities are not required. So in effect, we don't save a thing in terms of climate change. Folks, I think as a regulatory commissioner, I often had myself look at issues through the eyes of the consumer. And what would a consumer think? What would a consumer think when we could bring that balance of payments deficit and the economy and our job situation back to normal if we did OCS throughout the OCS, including offshore East Coast Virginia, where the governor of that state has asked for it, including a more dramatic program in the Gulf of Mexico, including offshore West Coast, and including other areas of Alaska that are prohibited by this particular draft plan. So my final urging would be that from a regulatory perspective, the Department of Interior encourage the President to recognize that an emergency exists and that expedited regulatory processes are needed for more oil and gas development out west. Thank you very much.
And after Aaron, Christina.
For the record, my name is Aaron Strick, A-A-R-O-N, Strick, S-T-R-Y-K. And I'm here today to urge that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the federal government not only ensure that OCS leasing move forward, but also take steps to ensure that future investors can develop these leases in a timely manner and with known certainty in the permitting process. While I commend the federal government for allowing additional lease sales in the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas, in their recent actions, they've done nothing to encourage future investment. Instead, the federal agencies have engaged in issuing ever-changing rules, promulgating confusing and complex regulations, and withholding essential permits that have impeded and stopped development. For a recent example, one must look no further than the failure to approve the Keystone Pipeline project from Canada to Texas. This project represents one of the most important updates to America's energy infrastructure in decades and would guarantee thousands of jobs and help diversify America's energy sources. The State Department's own findings indicate that that pipeline would pose no undue risk to people or the environment, neither by the type of crude it would be carrying nor the safety of the pipeline itself. Despite this, the State Department announced a few weeks ago it wants to explore a new route for the pipeline, and this comes after the State Department studied 15 different routes and issued an environmental impact statement that totaled more than 10,000 pages. The entire review process to date has generated more than 300,000 comments from the public and produced no action. While this decision may please some individuals, it will cost the American people an estimated 20,000 construction and manufacturing jobs, 118,000 spin-off jobs, and of course, reliable, affordable energy from our energy trading partner in Canada. Now, we can't let this same fate befall the Alaska OCS. It's no secret that our vast energy resources provide, like it or not, approximately 90% of the state's tax revenue, and that oil production is dropping at an alarming rate. The Alaska OCS could add hundreds of thousands of additional barrels per day to production from Alaska. And I understand the concerns of our opponents of the leasing program, and I agree that resource development should not be pursued if it unduly threatens the safety and well-being of people, wildlife, aquatic resources, and subsistence activities. That said, it has been proven time and again that responsible resource development can occur and wildlife and the environment can be protected, which is evidenced by the 35 wells already that has been drilled in the Beaufort Sea and in the Chukchi Sea, all without serious incident. Opponents see OCS development as an either-or scenario. Either we don't drill at all, or we do drill and in the process compromise the Arctic's fragile marine environment without question. And I see OCS development as a win-win situation in which everyone benefits in the form of jobs, additional throughput for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, reduced reliance on foreign energy, and hundreds of billions of dollars in local, state, and federal revenues, all with no environmental trade-offs. So today we face one of these either-or situations. We can either follow the example set by the Keystone Pipeline and continue to stall the development of the OCS, which puts at risk all of the 2.5 million workers supported by the U.S. oil and natural gas industry, or we can move forward with development as a win-win solution that benefits all of us in the form of economic growth, energy security, and job creation. Thank you.
Christina? After Christina, Tom, R-U-E-T-E-S. Tom, R-U-E-T-E-S.
Hello. I timed myself and this took me 2 minutes and 53 seconds, so should be all right. My name is Christina, C-H-R-I-S-T-I-N-A. My last name is Mounce, M-O-U-N-C-E. I'm originally from Anchorage, Alaska, but I grew up in several towns: Casper, Wyoming, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Midland, Texas. The environmentalists in this room may not understand the connection between those towns, but I bet you the industry here today does. I grew up in the oil circuit. My father started out as a roughneck on the North Slope. He worked with the slope from the mid-1870s until 1986. He then returned to school, earning his petroleum engineering degree from LSU in the early 1990s. Go Tigers. At first he worked directly for various companies, British Petroleum, ConocoPhillips, etc. Eventually he began to set out on his own path as a private contractor. He's essentially the guy who tells the industry where they should drill, and is very successful at what he does. Over the years, I've met some pretty important people. My father was a deacon at the church George Bush frequented before his presidency. I've shared a shrimp cocktail with T.B. Pickens at my father's local country club. Hell, I went to grade school, middle school, high school, and college at the same place Dick Cheney attended. My point is, I've really gotten to know a lot of the good old boys. Generally speaking, I liked a lot of them. I actually do understand the need for jobs and how lucrative being associated with the oil field can be. I understand this because I've lived it. Some of my most cherished memories consist of being at my father's fish camp on Lake Amistad, hanging with the good old boys, laughing and sharing whiskey. But as the whiskey flowed and the laughter got louder, inhibitions were inevitably lowered. And what I heard while hanging out with the good old boys greatly disturbed me. They would laugh and joke about how they covered up this oil spill, how they bribed this government worker, how they once again got one over on the environmentalists. And this wasn't an isolated incident, or just two people chatting. Over the years, I would hear this conversation numerous times, from numerous people. Each time the details were slightly different, but the message was the same. What I heard was, we don't care about the environment, and we just made a bunch of money, ha ha ha. Well, I'm not laughing. I wasn't then, and I sure as hell am not now. You have to understand, a lot of these people still do not believe in global warming, so talking about carbon dioxide and methane emissions falls on deaf ears. These people largely are not from Alaska, and they don't care about how their trucks are destroying the vegetation in the tundra. These people don't even care about how they're destroying the places they call home. This goes beyond a massive oil spill. Any drop is too much. The diesel spill on the tundra from these trucks is too much. The acid that changes pH levels of the water is too much. I would like to point out that not all the oil industry thinks this way, just most of them. T.B. Pickens, he's one of the decent ones. He's trying to sound the alarm about our addiction to foreign oil. Pickens has said, I've been an oil man my whole life, but this one emergency we can't drill a way out of. Pickens has also stated, a fool with a plan is better than a genius with no plan, and we look like fools without a plan. I agree with this, Stephen. And right now, we do not have an oil spill cleanup plan for the Arctic. We are fools without a plan. The answer to our foreign oil dependency is not drilling in the Arctic. The oil industry as a whole is just way too responsible to drill the outer continental shelf. A year's worth of oil is not worth a century of destruction for the last risky environments left in the world. Please do not allow drill baby drill turn into spill baby spill all over the Arctic. Listen to T. Boone Pickens. He's a leader in the oil industry. Thank you.
Tom Rutez. Tom. Liz.
Flushenko. No one can. Oh, I thought Tom was next.
Tom is,
My name is Liz Flushenko. That's spelled Lizglooschenko. Good evening. I'm the business manager of the Alaska Trucking Association. The Trucking Association is an Alaska trade association comprised of nearly 200 member companies representing diverse trucking operations in Alaska. In 2010, Alaska Trucking employed more than 14,500 persons, paid annual wages of more than $720,000, and consists of hundreds of family-owned and corporate trucking businesses. The ATA supports an aggressive lease sale on the OCS of Alaska for the following reasons. First, trucking needs oil. During the shift from carbon-based fuels to alternative fuel sources, diesel fuel will continue to be the prime source of fuel for on-road trucking for the next 25 to 50 years. Secondly, Alaska needs oil. A recent study indicates that OCS development in the Chukchi, Buford, and North Aleutian basins could generate annual average of 35,000 jobs, payrolls of $72 billion, cumulative state revenue of $15 billion, and potential property taxes to local governments of $4 billion over the next 50 years. And thirdly, America needs oil. The unrest in the Middle East and other oil-producing areas serves as a wake-up call for us to finally increase our domestic production to provide for our national energy security. And lastly, BOEM has the ability and the obligation to move the process forward to provide the oil that our industry, our state, and our nation so desperately need. For these and many other reasons, the Alaska Trucking Association urges the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to move forward as soon as possible and develop an aggressive leasing program of the OCS in Alaska. To paraphrase Senator Mark Bagan, let Alaska be America's petroleum reserve. Thank you.
Jim Gilbert. And after Mr. Gilbert, Rochelle Daniel.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the draft environmental impact statement. My name is Jim Gilbert, J-I-M-G-I-L-B-E-R-T, and I'm president and testifying on behalf of my company, Butelhoven System Services. I'm a 37-year resident of Alaska and originally came to the state for the Prudhoe Bay field startup. Our 800-plus employees provide technical expertise to the oil and gas industry in Alaska, the Gulf of Mexico, and overseas. First and foremost, we want and need OCS lease sales to continue sooner rather than later and with the greatest long-term benefits for the state of Alaska, Alaskan workers, Alaskan businesses, and all Alaskans. The Outer Continental Shelf holds one of the keys to Alaska's future. Foremost, we need this to become more energy dependent within our shores. The U.S. needs this to be more energy secure. I urge BOEM to adopt the proposed EIS and move forward on lease sales. Thank you very much.
Laura Reinbold.
Hello, my name is Laura, L-O-R-A, Reinbold, R-E-I-N-B-O-L-D, and thanks for all your patience. It's hard to say something too new, but I'll try to make this a fresh testimony for you guys. I was also born and raised in Alaska. I raised 2 boys here as well. And I am familiar with draft lands. I've worked and helped weigh in on them, both on the municipal and state level, so I know they're a lot of hard work. So once they've had all this thought, hopefully they'll move into the action phase. Right now, I'm hoping for a bright future for Alaska and for our nation, but it's not looking good. With a high national debt growing and oil production slow, our state budgets are very, very high, and we're headed for a crash course. Our operating budgets continue to be high, and our production is low, and also our heavily dependence on foreign oil. Recently, I've lived in Norway for 2.5 years, and we've learned a lot from Norway. Oil drives the Alaska economy. A lot of products that we use every day are oil. It's not just profits that people talk about. We wear many clothes that are made of oil. We have tires in our car, carpets, water bottles, fleece. We're all, each and every single one of us in this room and all over are very, very dependent on oil and the byproducts of oil. The royalties and taxes from oil help pay for our infrastructure. They help pay for education. They help pay for government jobs, including environmental jobs. Oil is to vehicles like water to our bodies. We all enjoy, or many of us enjoy, snow machines and cars, boats and planes, and they need oil, just as we need water, for our bodies and food for our bodies. Like I said, we're very dependent on oil in many aspects. Unless all of us are willing to live like the Amish without vehicles and all the backpacks and things like that are made from oil, we all need to realize we do need oil, and we're getting into a crisis in this nation. I do support this draft. The Outer Continental Shelf, I believe it's very minimal. It looks like one Chuck C and one Buford new lease. It's very minimal, and there are many checks and balances in place. There's oversight with Bessie. The courts are ready to sue for any violation. Just to step back, again, I mentioned Norway. Norway has been very, very successful. It's not perfect. Oil drilling is not perfect, but Norway has been very, very successful. They have a beautiful ecosystem that I was able to enjoy when I was over there. Yet their economy and their education systems are thriving. We can have our cake and eat it too. For Alaska's future, and to promote national security, to reduce debt, and to fund our government and state jobs and education or infrastructure, I would highly encourage us to move forward from the draft phase and move into the action phase. So thank you very much.
My name is Delise Calcote, D-E-L-I-C-E, Calcote, C-A-L-C-O-T-E. I am a water clan. I am a Ludic of Upshall Island on my mother's side, and my father was from South Naknek, and I'm part Sami. I've worked for Cook Inlet Marine Mammal Council since 1997 in the capacity of secretary. I've attended both federal hearings on the Cook Inlet beluga, provided comments on the federal notices of endangered species listing, environmental impact statements, and critical habitat for the Cook Inlet beluga. I've also worked and volunteered, and recently I was appointed as the interim executive director of Alaska Intertribal Council. I oppose any drilling for oil and gas in the Chukchi, Beaufort, or Arctic Ocean. I oppose and object to any exemption of 500 meters around all marine vessels that produce noise, dump sewage, emit toxic air particulate matter into the ambient airways. The industry cannot prove that they will not disproportionately affect the communities of the Chukchi, Beaufort Seas, nor the Cook Inlet, the Bristol Bay, nor the Aleutian Trenches. The industry cannot prove that the radioactive, I was surprised to read that during the Gulf oil spill that all oil has a radioactive background. So I do not want any radioactive dumping of pollution, drilling muds, whatever, into the oceans, impacting our coastal communities, their territories, nor the waterways that we have used and occupied, that we have relied on for our traditional and cultural foods. I oppose any air permits to pollute our airways that are already impacted with Arctic haze from developing nation carbon emissions that sink into the Arctic areas and are notably impacting the ice shelf of the Arctic. I oppose any drilling, as there are no Coastal Zone Management Act anymore. I think that transferring NPDES to the state seems to have been an irresponsible move. ConocoPhillips has not shown it will comply with nitrogen dioxide standards. Their modeling shows they can cause pollution levels to reach 98% of allowable concentration. High levels of nitrogen dioxide can cause breathing problems, asthma, heart problems. Fine particulate matter also causes heart disease, can lead to death. Carbon melts the ice, furthering climate changes. I oppose any degradation of the historic bays, ancient and cultural traditional waters that support our food resources. I object to the rising health problems of asthma, lung disease, brain damages, nerve-related diseases, and debilitating nervous disorders that are here in Alaska and rising. No industry has disproved their emissions do not harm. The American Heart Association says there is no safe level of particulate matter in our airways. We have listened to our tribal leaders and our healthcare workers who note the physical changes that are occurring in our peoples, the animals, the lands, the waters, the airways. We have reports of babies that cannot return to their villages due to the poor air quality and the air alerts that seem to be like a daily constant alert. Our peoples have used and occupied the lands and territories. The ocean is our safety store, and we have not voted that it is up for industry to disrupt, to harm, to change, to take our food resources, nor to destroy the critical environment that we require to live on, to exist on. The mining industry do not eat nor rely on the living marine resources of the oceans, but our peoples live, eat, and rely on our traditional and cultural resources since time immemorial. We have many studies that have shown that you take us off of our food and we get sick. I object to the over 200 abandoned pipelines in Cook Inlet, the flaring from the oil platforms, the absence of relief wells. The flaring is not allowed off the coast of Santa Barbara. All gas has to be re-injected until the oil is gone, then the gas can be taken. I object to this process. Section 404 of the Clean Air Act is not a permit to pollute forevermore. I endorse the testimony provided by Rick Steiner and Mr. Hartzik. And that's it. And thank you very much.
Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, Stand.
Thank you. My name is Sammy Glassford. I am the president of the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce. The Anchorage Chamber represents nearly 1,100 business members that in turn represent more than 60,000 livelihoods here in Anchorage. The Anchorage Chamber has been active in Anchorage since 1915. Our reality is we are an oil and gas resource state. We should be proud of that and not ashamed. We should promote that globally, not halt it locally. Every year the throughput in the Trans-Alaska Pipeline decreases by another 6%. Currently, we are at 1/3 of the pipeline's capacity, And any given cold snap, like the one we experienced last year, can paralyze the flow of oil because there is simply not enough being pushed through it. In addition, right here on our own shores in Anchorage, we still have an unexplored oil and gas field, yet every winter we fear that the lights will go out and our homes will turn cold. It is time that Alaskans realize that our energy situation is dire, and any opportunity to support new projects that will secure our future and support our ability to raise our families in the land we call home should be strongly considered. The Anchorage Chamber supports the 3 lease sales scheduled in the Alaska region. We especially want to show our support for the lease sales in the Cook Inlet. You said earlier, only if there is substantial interest in the Cook Inlet will there be a lease sale. In June 2011, the state of Alaska received the highest number of all time of Cook Inlet lease sale bids, or sale bid, in 28 years. But substantial interest should not be your deciding factor for including Cook Inlet, but rather substantial need. Given the availability, or lack thereof, of energy resources in Anchorage, we need Cook Inlet to be included as a future option. Thank you.
Tom Hendricks.
Yeah.
Ready?
I think I'll be a little late.
And after Mr. Hendricks, Fred Ferry.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Tom Hendricks. It's T-O-M-H-E-N-D-R-I-X Jr. And I'm here tonight as an employee of Carlisle Transportation System who employs 550 Alaskans and also the board president of the Alaskan Support Industry Alliance and a citizen of the great state of Alaska. It's Friday evening and 2 weeks before Christmas, and I can guarantee you that everyone in this room has somewhere else they'd rather be. But I'm here because I know that responsible resource development here in Alaska is essential to healthy economy both here in Alaska and also the United States as a whole. The outer continental shelf of Alaska is an amazing untapped resource whose time has come. Production in the Alaskan OCS could have a tremendous impact on our state and the nation, allowing the United States to import less foreign oil, which currently costs us hundreds of billions of dollars each year, threatens our security, and enriches our enemies. Not to mention the jobs that would be created which fuel our dismal economy. Why should we do it here? Because we have drilled 35 wells in the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas combined without an incident. I work with the companies that are participating in responsible resource development in Alaska, and I'm confident in their ability to responsibly develop our resources. We know the standards that they are held to both by state and federal government agencies, and especially by the residents of the state of Alaska. It's time for BOEM to encourage responsible offshore development for the benefit of our nation. As an Alaskan and an American, I ask that you please allow the 2012-2017 lease sale to move forward. Thank you for your time this evening.
Fred Parody. Fred is gone. Did I hear that?
Yes.
Okay. Lateral. Lady Lateral. Just Mr. Tuck.
Josh?
Josh? Okay, yeah, there it is. Tucker. And my thumb over the ER.
Thank you for hearing my testimony here today. My name is Joshua Tucker. For the record, that is spelled Joshua-Tucker. I'd like to begin by directly addressing the question here I'm going to share some testimony. I'm also going to ask some questions, and I think that's the best way for me to look at the environmental impact statement. First of all, my basic question, I think that Secretary Salazar and others will have to look at these questions to complete the process, is does the environmental impact statement go out 1 generation? Does it go out 2 generations? Does it, in fact, go out 7 generations or farther? Because that is the way that indigenous people all over what is now the territory of the United States and people all over the world have looked at their natural resource decisions. And so I think that since they've lived on this land and in the region, that some folks here are considering plans to develop, we should look at the way that they manage the land, because they've been pretty successful at it. So yeah, so does it go out 7 generations? Does it go out further? And also, I think, Rick Steiner brought up some really interesting points about global climate change. And I would like to know if the environmental impact statement addresses global climate change, not just in sort of a cursory way or in a mention, but in an adequate way, that puts global climate change as the #1 national security threat that the United States currently faces. And, I'm hearing some noises from behind me. People like to deny climate change. And even in Durban, South Africa right now, the COP17, the Conference of Parties, the UN Global Conference that looks at these issues is disintegrating. They are unable to come to a resolution on this because the United States is holding out. Even China willing to make an agreement, but the United States holding out. And so I think that if others want to bring national security into this, we've got to look at climate change. 99% of the world scientists agree that it's real. And that I've lived through a hurricane down in Louisiana. It was Hurricane Rita. I went down there after Katrina to engage in relief efforts, and I lived through Rita. And let me tell you, that stuff's scary. That is a national security threat when tens of thousands of people lose their home. People in Arctic communities who've had to move their communities, their entire villages, because the permafrost is melting, as it hasn't before for tens of thousands of years. That's what they live there, but the permafrost is melting now. Their communities are sinking into the mud. They can tell you that climate change is a national security threat. So I want to know, does the environmental impact statement address that? Or is it more of this, ethical oil stuff, that's just this drumbeat of propaganda that people are, beginning to believe themselves? Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, and I just encourage the Secretary and others in reviewing this statement to ask the questions about temperature. Is the gear ready for the temperature for oil spill recovery? Because we saw in Norway recently that oil spill there was delayed in being cleaned up for many, many days because the gear was not ready for the temperature. Thank you.
Just for the record, no one was referring to global warming and they was using that.
Oh, good. So we're all down. Global warming's real? Everybody, no questions? We're respectful.
Lois FC.
Global change is real.
And after Lois, Carly Weir. Carly, where are you here?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Lois Epstein, and I am a licensed engineer and the Arctic Program Director for the Wilderness Society, or TWS. I've spent over 20 years working on oil and gas technical and policy issues, nearly half in Alaska, roughly the other half in D.C., and I currently serve on the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement's Federal Advisory Committee for offshore drilling. My role at TWS is to help ensure that oil and gas drilling in Arctic Alaska is done well and in appropriate locations. TWS has over 500,000 members and supporters nationwide. Based on our technical analysis of the science, the state-of-the-art in oceanic oil spill response, and the oversight capabilities of BETSI, TWS's inevitable conclusion is that the country is not ready to drill in the Arctic Ocean and definitely will not be by 2017. Or certainly earlier. Surprisingly, when making the announcement for this draft 2012 to 2017 plan, BOEM did not accompany it with, one, a plan that addresses the deficiencies raised in the USGS June 2011 Arctic Science Needs Report, two, a research and/or incentive program to improve oil spill response technologies in general and under Arctic conditions, and three, a regulatory upgrade schedule that would implement the recommendations from the Oil Spill Commission that have not been implemented, the BOEMer, the Coast Guard Joint Investigation Team recommendations, and other post-BP spill investigative bodies' recommendations. Had that been done, certainly would have been more credible to talk about leasing in the Arctic, but it was not done. Additionally, it would be clear to BOEM that it could not make sufficient progress by 2017 to proceed with Arctic Ocean drilling with the necessary protections in place. Instead, BOEM is asking the public to accept Arctic Ocean drilling without those necessary protections, just as the Bush administration Minerals Management Service did. At present, we do not feel confident that Shell or any other operator will protect the Arctic Ocean, especially in light of the Gulf spill, merely by knowing that BOEM and BSEE have approved all existing permit requirements. It's not okay to the public to allow oil from major spills largely to dissolve or evaporate into this near pristine environment. And that is what happened when Shell had a recent spill in the North Sea. If there's any doubt about the likelihood of blowouts and other offshore problems in the Arctic, despite the testimony today, consider that the Alaska Oil and Gas Conservation Commission in its 50th anniversary report lists 10 North Slope and 8 Cook Inlet blowout events, with 4 of the latter offshore in shallow water. Additionally, there are other ways substantial amounts of crude can enter the water from offshore drilling. For example, in 1989, a frozen valve on Amoco's Anna offshore platform in Cook Inlet, which is in state waters, caused a spill of over 20,000 gallons of crude. Cleanup was not attempted because 80 to 90% of Cook Inlet's surface was covered with moving ice floes. Regarding ensuring sufficient flow through the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System and the pressure that might put on BOEM and BSEE to open the Arctic Ocean to drilling, there are several different ways to ensure that TAPS continues to operate, including technical upgrades to the pipeline, such as heaters and insulation, and/or increases in conventional, including heavy oil and unconventional oil drilling on state lands. Moreover, Alaska's North Slope oil producers, who also are TAPS owners, have a financial interest in keeping TAPS viable, so these producers will make the necessary investments to upgrade the line and not strand North Slope oil, and there's a large amount of reserves there still. This week's lease sale of state lands on the North Slope showed significant interest by oil companies. Plus, this winter's exploration season on state lands is the largest in decades. I want to emphasize that, despite in-state and DC-based rhetoric, drilling on federal lands or waters is not essential to ensure that TAPS remains viable for decades to come, as a key court decision using industry's data has shown, as well as a recently released economic study. The tremendous pressure brought to bear by industry and some in Congress for BOEM and BSEE to approve Arctic Ocean drilling is inappropriate and unfortunate. As a result of this pressure, it appears that the Arctic Ocean will not receive the environmental and subsistence protections it deserves. As TWS stated during the scoping hearings earlier this year, BOEM should get its existing house in order, i.e. ensure that the Gulf of Mexico and existing Pacific Coast drilling is safe and spill likelihood is minimized, and to improve spill response capabilities overall before allowing the Arctic Ocean frontier to be open for business. Last sentence. Thank you. I'm done.
5 minutes. 3-minute limit. 2 minutes beyond the 2 minutes. Yes, your picture.
Eric Myers and
on the other side.
Nico Spastic. Mr. Myers.
Good evening.
If everyone could keep in mind, I can only write so fast and it's very late, so if everybody could speak at a reasonable speed, I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Eric Myers. I'm speaking on behalf of Audubon, Alaska. I would want to address my comments to Arctic-specific aspects of the draft plan. Audubon strongly urges that the lease sales proposed for the Chukchi and Arctic seas be removed from the 5-year plan for 2 basic reasons. The oil industry is not prepared to clean up an oil spill in the Arctic Ocean, and there is a lack of essential information about the biology of the Arctic Ocean that makes a responsible decision on whether to proceed impossible at this time. I want to focus some attention on the question of accountability regarding representations that have been made. Not so very long ago, as a candidate for president, Barack Obama spoke unambiguously in support of prohibiting drilling in the Chukchi Sea. A few months later, Secretary Salazar, after assuming his position as head of the Department of the Interior, suspended the prior Bush administration's proposed 5-year leasing plan, referring to that prior administration's plan as a, quote, headlong rush of the worst kind. Secretary Salazar described the Bush proposal as a process rigged to force hurried decisions based on bad information. And that was before the Deepwater Horizon, which exposed the industry's empty promises about its spill response capability. The industry was incapable of mounting an effective response to Deepwater Horizon, and that was in the Gulf of Mexico with all the advantages of extensive industry infrastructure, relatively mild weather, and an unlimited labor pool, and an enormous fleet of private fishing vessels, and the vast resources of the U.S. Coast Guard. By contrast, in the Arctic Ocean, operators would have to contend with broken ice, freezing temperatures, months-long darkness, fierce storms, with essentially no infrastructure, no private fishing vessels, no local labor supply of any size, and the closest Coast Guard station 1,000 miles away. When Shell talks about oil spill response, the word robust invariably comes up. Shell's Vice President of Alaska especially loves the word robust to describe Alaska's spill response plan. I believe we have a very robust oil spill plan. It was robust before Deepwater, and it has become even more robust since then. Robust is a perfect word for Shell to use because it sounds great and really means nothing. Instead of robust, the words that should be used in an oil spill cleanup response plan for the Arctic are proven and demonstrated, but that's not possible. The oil industry, simply stated, cannot deliver on its promises. Claims made in Shell's most recent filings with the federal government about its oil spill response plans to the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas are not merely unrealistic, they are clearly unsupportable. Most importantly, they call into question all of Shell's claims about its ability to safely conduct drilling in the Arctic Ocean. Shell maintains it can recover over 90% of an oil spill in the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas. Mechanical recovery in the Exxon Valdez oil spill recovered approximately 8% of spilled oil. In Deepwater Horizon, the number was about 3%. Further, recent reports in Canada about documenting the Arctic response gap shows that cleanup would be impossible on average 3 to 5 days a week. The cleanup would not be at all possible for 44 to 84% of the time during the short Arctic drilling season, and for 7 to 8 months out of the year during the winter, no spill cleanup would be possible. In addition, Shell acknowledges that if it can't achieve well control at a leaking well, then its plan would be simply to abandon the well and leave the oil uncontained under the ice until the spring thaw. Shell then proposes to develop a cleanup plan. This is not a plan, at best is a plan to have a plan. Secretary Salazar had it right the first time. Additional leasing in the Arctic Ocean under this 5-year OCS plan will require, quote, hurried decisions based on bad information. The proposed Beaufort and Chukchi lease sales would only perpetuate the headlong rush of the worst kind. Again, we urge that the Chukchi and Beaufort lease sales be deleted from the current plan. And
4 minutes, please.
Okay, that's it.
And then after this speaker, we've got to take a little break for our court reporter, 10 minutes, and we're coming back.
Okay, my name is Nico Spastic, Nikos, last name Pastos, P-A-S-T-O-S, and I'm submitting comments on behalf of the Center for Water Advocacy. We're located in Homer, Alaska. It's a nonprofit public interest conservation firm. I was born here in Alaska, lived most of my life in Alaska. I've been a commercial fisherman. Currently, my profession is I'm an environmental sociologist. In particular, I study technological disasters and the human impacts, socioeconomic, cultural impacts to human communities. Most of my comments are, well, the Center for Water Advocacy is mostly based in Alaska, but we have membership in 10 states, and we have significant members in tribal communities and Alaska Native organizations in Alaska, as well as tribal governments in other states. Center for Water Advocacy completely is opposed to outer continental shelf drilling anywhere offshore of the United States, and absolutely endorses alternative number 8, which is a no action alternative. Let's see. I'm going to go through just a few of the comments, and then we'll submit much more extensive written comments before the deadline. And these comments, some of these comments were submitted by tribal communities and tribal leaders that we work with. As witnesses to the significant harm to the health of humans and much of the living creatures of Prince William Sound, and ongoing deaths and cascading environmental decline from the Exxon Valdez oil spill in the Gulf of Alaska in 1989, it's critically important to involve all communities in every process of industrial activities in our oceans. Center for Water Advocacy continues to support implementing the precautionary principle of a comprehensive ocean policy, including all phases of industrial development and energy development. So not only are the communities in the Arctic and in Cook Inlet and the entire outer continental shelf of Alaska first responders to international local disasters, but they're integral to the stewardship of all resources for future generations. Indigenous peoples and tribal communities in the Arctic are disproportionately impacted by industrial activities in the Gulf of Alaska, Bering Sea, Chukchi Sea, and Beaufort Sea. Please refer to the recent Department of Interior and Management Service OCS study entitled 3 Decades of Research on Socioeconomic Effects Related to Offshore Petroleum Development in Coastal Alaska. Food security is essential for the Arctic and Alaskan indigenous peoples, the economic sustainability, and national interest. And what I mean by food security is literally the fisheries habitat, the economic fisheries resources, and the actual nourishment that comes from the ocean. The living resource and biodiversity of the Arctic and Alaska regions, the fisheries, marine mammals, peoples, flora, and fauna are paramount to indigenous science, culture, and identity. So we endorse ecosystem-based management with maximum tribal participation and planning, which could break the frontiers of interdisciplinary science and community-based participatory research to provide communities with tools to protect our ocean coasts and inland waters. The indigenous peoples who have inhabited the Arctic since time immemorial carry the wisdom and expertise to maintain, protect, and honor the integrity of the ecosystems to provide customary, traditional, commercial resources today. Historically, the indigenous maritime heritage of the Alaska and Arctic area allowed our forefathers in the United States to conduct international trade and commerce. We support indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge and wisdom as best available science. Traditional knowledge is an important foundational element of the ecosystem-based management principles of all planning efforts. Indigenous science is an important pillar for resilient coastal communities that can adapt to impacts of hazard climate change. So in the outer continental shelf, this study, the draft programmatic environmental, take another minute.
We're at 4.5.
All right. Well, then we'll submit much more detailed comments. This will be a rehearsed thing for me. Thank you for your time, and we absolutely endorse alternative number 8.
Thank you.
Thank you.
10 minutes. We are coming back in 10 minutes. We're not leaving here until the bucket's empty.